country to visit with farmers, ranchers, and agriculture producers about the need for a 5-year farm bill that is long enough to provide certainty and short enough to respond to market changes. Chairman Thompson and I hosted more than 150 Kansans at a listening session in the middle of a wheat field near Gypsum, Kansas, and I suspect that many of the issues raised there will also be raised again today. I was pleased to see those issues directly addressed in the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2024, which passed on a bipartisan basis out of this committee last year. That legislation would have maintained American food independence, invested tax dollars where we would see a return on those dollars, protected crop insurance, promoted trade programs that helped Americans remain competitive and secure, conducted rigorous oversight of the executive branch, promoted animal health, invested in agricultural research at America's land-grant universities, and much more. As the chairman of this subcommittee on livestock, dairy, and poultry, I was proud of that legislation, and as a Kansan, I was proud too. I'm eager to hear from you all today about what's working, what should be considered, where additional investment may be required, and where the federal government needs to just get out of your way. As time has taught us, even if well-intended, more legislation and regulation is almost never the answer. The past 4 years under the Biden administration were a perfect example of what can happen when the government gets in the way. Whether it was proposed Seminole framework that would have increased costs for producers and consumers with no real impact on public health, its botched response to the highly pathogenic avian influenza, or water regulations which would have put several processing facilities out of business, we must learn from these mistakes and not hamstring America's farmers, ranchers, and our ag producers. As we work to craft the next farm bill, we look forward to today's conversation to continue our working together in the 119th Congress. With that, I'd now like to welcome the distinguished ranking member, the gentleman from California, Mr. Acosta, for any opening remarks that he would like to give.
Thank you very much, Chairman Mann, and members of our subcommittee for, I think, this important, timely hearing. It's important that we have people who are where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, talk to us about the state of the livestock industry throughout the country and the regional impacts that we're all feeling with the challenges that we've had in the last several years, especially with the high-path avian flu and the poultry industry and the dairy industry, and how we've tried to address that. So it's important that we have that conversation here today. But let me also say that this follows on the backdrop of the President's announcement of tariffs pending with regards to Canada, Mexico, and Canada, Mexico, and China being implemented today. And for those of you who I've served with, I've had the privilege to serve with over the years, what I say is not new. I've never been a fan of tariffs, regardless if it's a Democratic or Republican administration. I just think that they're a tax on American consumers, they're a tax on producers, and everyone has leverage in that game. And by the way, I remember being a part of the effort to rebrand NAFTA, NAFTA 2, or the United States-Mexico-Canada Accord, which was at the time when I voted for it and supported and on a bipartisan fashion, heard that it was the greatest, best trade deal ever known to mankind. And my gosh, if that were the case, I'm wondering why, on that backdrop, we're putting tariffs on two of our biggest trading partners, Canada and Mexico. By the way, it's subject for review next year. They not only are our top trading partners, but I'm looking forward to hearing witnesses comment about their view, because our fragile food supply chain, as I have always said, as a third-generation farmer in California, started off in the dairy business, my family did, know how to milk cows and a few other things, are, I think, witnessed by the impact that we've seen that food, as I always say in every committee hearing, is a national security issue. It is. Majority of Americans, I don't necessarily think about it because they go to the grocery store and all the food in the world's there and their favorite fast food or restaurants. But it is a national security issue, an international security issue, as we've seen Russia weaponize grain in this Ukraine war after their attack. So today we're going to hear from producers on how fragile our food supply is. We cannot take it for granted. We had experiences, all of us did, during the COVID-19 pandemic that demonstrated how fragile our food supply system is. and how emergencies like the pathogenic avian flu can impact industries across the nation, especially our poultry and dairy industries. As I reflect today, I'd be remiss not to mention the continued challenges from producers in my district as they have concern about terminations of critical civil service staff within the United States Department of Agriculture's Ag Research Service, Natural Resources Conservation Services, the Animal Plant and Health Inspection Services, APHID, and much more. This includes firings of people who were working on avian flu response, trying to help producers recover while dealing with preventing the next pandemic. This administration now is trying to figure out how to hire those workers back. I think that's evidence that even they know that it was misguided and poorly timed. This continues to be a grave concern of my district and constituents. Let me give you some other examples quickly, and I'll allow our witnesses to tell us what they want us to know. We've had delays in payments from the Emergency Livestock Program, helping producers impacted by the high-path avian flu. In California, only 1% of our dairies have received their payments in California. That's not right. Delays in payments for conservation services, leaving farmers in question as whether or not they want to move forward with key projects to help sustain themselves and equip programs and the like. Delays in key research that requires 24/7, such as those at USDA Ag Research Services. These are things that I'm hearing from my constituents here, and you couple that with the issue of the potential impact of tariffs and mass deportation, and I can tell you in farm country in California, folks are concerned. The testimonies today that we're looking forward to hearing will talk about investing in the next generation's workforce. It's critical that we retain the talented people in the United States Department of Agriculture to ensure resilience and security of our food supply chain. I'd like to submit for the record concerns I've heard from my district, Mr. Chairman, about the delays in this funding, if that will be accepted.
Without objection.
Without objection, thank you. California continues to be, as you know, the largest ag-producing state in the nation, $58 billion last year at the farm gate with over 300 commodities. I have the honor and privilege, along with my other colleagues in the Valley, to represent parts of Fresno and Tulare County, two of the top ag-producing counties in the state and in the nation. We're proud of that fact, like you're proud, Mr. Chairman, of your production in your home district as well. And so trade will continue to play a role in this Congress, and I look forward to working with my colleagues in a bipartisan, comprehensive effort on trade agreements and getting a bipartisan farm bill, as you stated on the outset, and we need to get that work done here this year. And I'll look forward to hearing the testimony. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ranking Member. Next, I will recognize Chairman Thompson, my good friend from Pennsylvania, for any opening comments that he would like to make.
Well, Chairman, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and thank you to Chairman Mann and Ranking Member Costa for convening the first hearing of the Subcommittee on Livestock, Dairy, and Poultry in the 119th Congress. And more importantly, thank you to our witnesses who have taken time out of your busy schedules to appear before us today. I look forward to hearing from each of you. The timing of this hearing is critical. Our producers are dealing with a historic high pathogenic avian influenza outbreak, harmful state mandates like Proposition 12, and difficult market conditions, along with a slew of other issues. Now, this hearing today is a great opportunity for us to learn from the experts in front of us about the best way to combat these problems. Over the last 3 years, I've had the privilege to travel with many of my colleagues, actually, to more than 40 states and one territory to learn about farmers' and ranchers' top concerns. Given the size and diversity of the livestock industry, we need a full picture of on-the-ground conditions and an honest assessment of what is and isn't working to ensure we appropriately arm producers with the tools they need for success in the coming years. Now, I'm proud of the Farm Food and National Security Act of 2024 that we passed out of committee on a bipartisan basis last year. We increased funding for the three-legged stool, including language on negotiating animal disease regionalization agreements, improved investment opportunities for livestock auction owners, doubled funding for MAP and FMD programs, and provided a fix for Proposition 12, just to name a few. Unfortunately, for numerous reasons outside of my control, we weren't able to get this bill across the finish line, and America's producers are the one that's paying the prices. We cannot let this year be a repeat of last. I look forward to hearing from you all today about the issues you're facing and the provisions you'd like to see included in a new farm bill. I appreciate the partnership of Chairman Mann and Ranking Member Acosta, and of course Ranking Member Craig, as we continue to explore potential solutions to the issues that will surely be highlighted in today's discussion. And once again, thank you all for being here to testify. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson. Next, I'll recognize Ranking Member Craig for any opening comments she would like to make.
Good morning, and thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to Ranking Member Costa for convening this hearing, and most importantly, as Chairman Thompson said, thank you so much to the witnesses. As spring approaches, I know this is a very busy season for all of you, and I appreciate you coming to Washington, particularly during such a critical time, to give us an update. I am concerned about the state of the industry. We have animal disease outbreaks, high input costs, a holdup of USDA cost share payments, and a destabilized trade environment. None of these things provide certainty for producers or make life more affordable for American families. Some of this uncertainty could be reduced by a bipartisan farm bill, one that strengthens our animal disease preparedness by investing in the research and infrastructure needed to effectively combat animal disease outbreaks. We talked about the many reasons we need a bipartisan farm bill last month in our full committee hearing, so I won't belabor the point, but I hope we can navigate through a partisan reconciliation bill to achieve a bipartisan farm bill this year. Producers need it. The livestock and poultry industry faces some very serious issues with avian influenza. While I appreciate USDA has given some thought to a new plan to fight the spread in poultry, questions remain. How will it impact trade? Does USDA have the staff to implement this strategy? I'm looking forward to hearing from our panelists today about how USDA's approach to high path will impact their operations, as well as their suggestions for how Congress can work with the Trump administration to better combat this disease. Finally, farmers are worried that trade fights and continued consolidation will hurt their bottom line. The last time this administration started a similar trade war, it cost U.S. farmers nearly $30 billion, around $1 billion of which was in part due to China launching retaliatory tariffs on U.S. pork, and we know that those producers were not made whole. At a time where family farms across this country are disappearing, policymakers should be focused on facilitating access to reliable markets and making the food you produce more affordable for hardworking American families. The tariffs on our largest trading partners that went into effect today are going to be devastating to this industry and to family paychecks across our nation. Thank you again for being here, and to the Livestock Subcommittee for hosting this hearing. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The chair would request that other members submit their opening statements for the record so the witnesses may begin their testimony to ensure that there's ample time for questions. To introduce our first witness today, I'm pleased to yield to the full committee's ranking member, Ms. Craig.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. It is indeed my honor to introduce my friend and my constituent, Mr. John Zimmerman, who comes from the top turkey producing state in the country. Let me just repeat that for my friends from Wisconsin. The top turkey producing state in the country, my state of Minnesota. He just finished a term as the chairman of the National Turkey Federation, and prior to that, he was the president of Minnesota Turkey Growers. Finally, he's a member of my Farmer Advisory Council back home in Minnesota. As a second-generation Minnesota turkey farmer, raising about 100,000 turkeys every year, John is a veteran of the industry. I look forward to hearing your testimony and continuing to work together. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back and welcome Mr. Zimmerman.
Thank you. To introduce our second witness today, I'm pleased to yield to our colleague, the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Finsett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Minnesota's 1st Congressional District is a pork powerhouse district. We have some counties that has more pigs than people. And with that, it's an honor to introduce my friend, Lori Stevermer, who is the president of the National Pork Producers Council. Lori and her husband, Dale, raise pigs and crops near Easton, Minnesota, and have 3 adult children, Brett and his wife, Tressa, Adam, and Beth. Moreover, Lori is the Customer Success Manager for Alltech's U.S. pork business, having spent her time in sales and marketing the animal nutrition business for over 30 years. Her previous experience includes 9 years on the executive board of the Minnesota Pork Producers Association, including 2 years as president and a member of various state and national committees. Lori represents the best of southern Minnesota and is a tremendous advocate for the swine industry at the local, state, and national levels. And we thank her for being here today. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
I'll now yield to our subcommittee's ranking member, Mr. Costa, to introduce 2 of our witnesses.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and it is my honor and privilege to introduce Mike West, who up until the reapportionment in 2020 was a constituent of mine, but still a neighbor and a friend from Hillmar, California. He's chairman of the United Egg Producers and president of J.S. West and Companies, Inc. Their headquarters is in Modesto, but they have been a large part of California's agricultural incredible diversity and productivity. It's family-owned business over 100 years, as Mike will proudly tell you, that they've been a producer of eggs and other products, and they certainly know what you're doing. And he and I had a conversation a week ago or so about the challenges they've been facing with the avian flu, and he's got some very good information that he wants to share with us, so I'm looking forward to his testimony. And following that, I've also have the privilege to thank Walter Scheitzer for joining us as well. You're a 3rd-generation Montana farmer, as I understand it, who raises registered black Angus cattle, hay and grain, and consults on the national agricultural trade. Currently serves as the Montana Farmers Union president, and we're very pleased that you're here to give us an idea of the challenges you're facing in Montana, and we look forward to your testimony.
Thank you. I'll now yield to the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Baird, to introduce our next witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm pleased to introduce a fellow Hoosier, Mr. Larry Hopkins, who currently serves as the Region 3 Director on the Executive Board of the American Sheep Industry Association, and that covers Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio, and Wisconsin. But most importantly, he's a graduate of Purdue University. In addition to his board seat, he is an ASI's chair of the Legislative Action Council. Larry and his family own and operate a purebred sheep and wool operation called Little Eagle Valley Farm in Westfield, Indiana. He is also a partner in the family dairy farm, which is managed by his brother. Larry has held multiple positions with the Indiana Sheep Association and Indiana Farm Bureau, and he received the Shepherd of the Year Award and served on the Indiana Sheep and Wool Council, which oversees the state checkoff program. So Larry, thank you for your dedication to the sheep industry, and we are excited to have you here today to testify. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Troy Sander. I get the pleasure of introducing the past chairman of the Live Cattle Marketing Committee for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Troy also serves as the Chief Operating Officer for Heritage Beef, a cattle feeding operation based in southwest Kansas, and its affiliated feed yard, Neosho Valley Feeders, located in Parsons, Kansas, right in the heart of the Big First District. Troy has decades of experience in all aspects of the cattle feeding industry, including procurement, marketing strategies, financial and risk management, and regulatory oversight. Growing up, he worked alongside his father in Kansas feed yards and helped operate their custom farming and harvesting business. He has held several roles with NCBA and served in positions for the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, CFTC, and Kansas Livestock Association. Troy and his wife have been married for more than 30 years and are proud parents of 4 sons and 7 grandchildren. Troy, thank you for being here today to share your expertise. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you to all of the witnesses for joining us today. We'll now proceed with your testimony. You'll each have 5 minutes. The timer in front of you will count down to 0, at which point your time has expired, and I'll make a subtle little tap with the gavel. So first up, Mr. Zimmerman, Please begin when you are ready.
Good morning, Chairman Mann, Ranking Member Costa, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to share the turkey industry's perspective today. This morning, I'd like to highlight the animal disease portion of the written testimony I've submitted for the record. For more than a year, the turkey industry has been dealing with the negative impacts of highly pathogenic avian influenza, as well as another highly consequential respiratory virus, avian metapneumovirus, which has impacted between 60 and 80% of turkey flocks nationwide. In Minnesota alone, 127 cases of HPAI in commercial turkeys have led to the loss of more than 6.6 million birds. And while HPAI is 100% lethal to birds exposed to the virus long enough, AMPV is more subtle but equally impactful due to its ability to significantly reduce egg sets of breeder stocks that produce the next generation of turkeys and cause severe, prolonged mortality in commercial flocks. Together, these two respiratory viruses have exponentially increased volatility, supply shortages, and market uncertainty. This 1-2 punch has caused many farmers to quit raising turkeys, with many on the brink of shutting down. Banks are very concerned about farms' financial health, and some farmers struggle to obtain credit after losing 30 to 50% of their flocks to AMPV. HPAI is a terrible disease, but with AMPV there is no indemnity or assistance. So I would urge the committee to make AMPV an eligible disease under USDA's Livestock Indemnity Program. This would assist growers in mitigating economic loss and will go a long way to assist poultry producers who are being hit hard stay on their farms producing the most abundant food supply in the world. On a more positive note, the first imported AMPV modified live vaccine doses reached Minnesota farms earlier this month, with more on the way to assist farmers nationwide. I want to personally thank members of this subcommittee for leading the charge in supporting the importation of this much-needed modified live vaccine for AMPV. I'd also like to thank USDA for their efforts in getting this across the finish line. However, I think it's important to acknowledge the industry's incredible frustrations with USDA's review process of an imported modified live vaccine. I appreciate the importance of ensuring the safety of a vaccine and that the AMP vaccine was the first of its kind to ever be approved. However, when an entire industry is at significant risk, it should take a matter of months, not more than a year, for a widely used and well-established global vaccine to be imported and available for use. I would encourage the committee to use your experience in evaluating USDA's review process to ensure a faster, more efficient response to future animal disease outbreaks. Unfortunately, AMPV is only half the battle. Time is of the essence on HPAI. A national strategy targeting all potential hosts of H5 influenza is lacking, allowing the virus to spread. The global poultry industry is in crisis, so pursuing a successful vaccination program that doesn't negatively impact trade as part of a stamp-out strategy is the key to significantly reducing disease rates. NTF is appreciative and encouraged by the robust strategy announced last week by USDA to address HPAI for egg layers. These investments in biosecurity, farmer relief, vaccine research, and the considerations for trade outlined in the plan are important steps towards stabilizing the market. However, these methods must extend beyond egg-laying operations to encompass the broader poultry sector, including the turkey industry. HPAI has devastated turkey producers, leading to significant flock losses, supply disruptions, and increased costs that directly impact consumers. A comprehensive response must recognize the unique needs of all poultry sectors, ensuring that all efforts include turkey growers. NTF supports research on finding an effective vaccine for HPAI, improving vaccine and diagnostic technology, while creating a vaccination plan for commercial poultry. As vaccine technology advances, there's growing interest in using HPAI vaccine to prevent disease spread and reduce losses as part of a stamping out strategy. As a parallel approach, NTF strongly encourages USDA to renegotiate with key trading partners to minimize the implications of vaccine deployment. If the U.S. fails to lead globally on implementing animal health solutions capable of preventing disease and death in commercial poultry, we'll be at a significant business disadvantage. Empowering USDA to increase proactive engagement with trading partners and solidify a new framework to reduce disease outbreaks' impact on the global food supply is essential. So in closing, as Congress writes a new farm bill, NTF urges the renewal and robust funding of animal disease programs such as the three-legged stool and the establishment of an HPAI strategic initiative to ensure the turkey industry has the tools necessary to combat future animal disease problems. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for that testimony. Next, Mrs. Sturvemer, please begin when you're ready.
Well, good morning, Chairman Mann, Ranking Member Costa, and members of the subcommittee. I'm Lori Stevemer, a third-generation pork producer from Easton, Minnesota, and president of the National Pork Producers Council. In thinking about the state of the livestock industry, let me start by saying that for several years, America's 60,000-plus pork producers have faced difficult times. While farmers are ever optimistic about the future, we are emerging from the worst period of losses in our industry's history, averaging $30 per head from late 2022 through early 2024. Since then, some production costs have declined and hog prices have improved, but many farmers have not recovered financially. To provide certainty, we need to continue farming. American agriculture needs a 5-year farm bill in which pork producers have 3 priorities. First, we must fix the problems caused by California's Proposition 12, which has increased farmers' operating costs, caused business uncertainty, and raised pork prices at the grocery store. As you know, this law reaches far beyond California to include farmers in other states and even other countries. The outcomes of Prop 12 defy common sense and create a patchwork of differing state regulations if Congress doesn't act. Prop 12, opposed by both President Trump and President Biden, is harming small and medium family farmers the most. We have followed the processes in place to address this issue, and we are before you because the Supreme Court has said it is a matter for Congress to take up. Second, we need to ensure that we protect livestock from foreign animal diseases such as African swine fever by funding USDA programs for detection, prevention, and rapid response to outbreaks, which we have come to call the 3-legged stool of animal health. This must include a strong laboratory network for surveillance and a stockpile of vaccines to quickly respond to diseases. Third, we must promote our exports by funding the Foreign Market Development Program and the Market Access Program. This is critical to our ability to produce wholesome, nutritious pork and serve our communities and employees. Moreover, we need to think hard about how policies and regulations on market reporting, labor, and competition impact family farms across America, not just now, but for future generations. I hope this committee will consider a 5-year reauthorization of the livestock mandatory reporting program. It ensures that reliable and accurate information influencing critical business decisions is available to farmers like myself and others at this table. Employment remains a top issue I hear from our producers. Farms across the country desperately need employees. The H-2A visa program must be expanded to include year-round foreign-born workers. Given our ongoing challenges, farmers need assurances we won't be subjected to regulations that restrict our ability to buy and sell our animals. For that reason, we urge Congress and the administration to defund and withdraw the Packers and Stockyards rules. Finally, let me say a few words about international trade. Without trade to our customers beyond our borders, we see and feel deep, substantial losses. International trade provides us with $66 per pig marketed. Without those markets for the wide range of products we produce, many of us simply would not be able to continue to farm. U.S. pork producers face tariff and non-tariff barriers to our products in many countries, including China and the EU. Opening new and expanding existing markets is paramount and allows many farms to stay afloat. The best way to do this is through comprehensive trade agreements, eliminating those tariff and non-tariff barriers. Just how important are those agreements? U.S. pork exports, for example, have increased over 2,000% in value since 1989, the year the U.S. implemented its agreement with Canada. In fact, last year the U.S. exported over 3 million metric tons, valued at nearly $8.63 billion, which set a new record. We now export more pork to the 20 countries where we have a comprehensive trade agreement than to the 80 other plus nations which we ship pork. It is also important to realize there are a variety of inputs we must bring in from China, including amino acids and trace minerals. We need to keep this in mind as Congress and the administration continue conversations on the future of our relationship with China. We are proud of the work we do and appreciate the opportunity to help feed American families and to present our perspective on the livestock industry. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today.
Thank you. Mr. West, please begin when you are ready.
Good morning, Chairman Mann, Ranking Member Costa, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify today on behalf of United Egg Producers. UEP is a farmer cooperative whose members independently market about 90% of the eggs sold in the United States. I am proud to serve on its board of directors, and I'm even prouder to serve as its chairman up until October of this year. My name is Mike West, and I am the proud president of JS West Milling Company in Modesto, California. JS West is a family-owned business. We produce eggs and we sell propane, and we've been in business for 116 years. My great-grandfather founded this company in 1909. Today we have capacity for 2 million laying hens, and we are also the largest privately held propane company in California, and we are looking to widening that gap. I am the fourth-generation leader of JS West Milling Company. My father came before me, his father came before that, and my great-grandfather started the business back in 1909. Our son Noah joined the business just 2 months ago. He represents the fifth generation of our family. His brother Nicholas will be next into the business within a couple of years. We take the family business seriously in our family. However, Noah, on his first day of work 2 months ago, his brand new office is on a chicken ranch. He pulled up to that ranch on his first day and was met with an eerie silence. That's because the month previous to that, we depopulated 550,000 chickens that were sick with highly pathogenic avian influenza. It was the second such depopulation in the calendar year 2024 for JS West. We depopulated 1.2 million chickens off of our Hillmar Ranch. Those numbers pale in comparison to what is happening across our country. We lost 1.2 million birds. Many, many more people are losing many more birds than that on a weekly basis. HPAI is in every state. It's been found in every continent on this planet. This country has depopulated 167 million chickens since this outbreak started in 2022. In 2025 alone, we've killed 30 million chickens. Laying hen chickens, excuse me. If we do some quick math, that's 500,000 birds almost per day this year. Prior to 2022, we've been able to hold this virus at bay through biosecurity. The current outbreak is different, ladies and gentlemen. The virus is different, and it's affecting other members of the barnyard. And we call those folks neighbors back home, and we're all very, very worried about it. And it's been obvious for some time that we needed to take a different path. And the egg industry is very happy to have heard the announcement by President Trump and his administration, Secretary Rollins from USDA. We were very heartened to hear this announcement on Thursday of last week, to hear about a 5-pronged plan to eradicate HPAI. And I'd like to talk about a few of those points that were announced last week. We are pleased to see a very strong focus on vaccination. It's our position that between industry collaborating with the federal government and rolling our sleeves up and really talking and solving this problem, we can solve this problem and stamp out HPAI, excuse me. Mandatory funding for research must be done at every level. Our lab system in this country is understaffed, and this can slow down testing and it can speed up spread. We would like to see fully staffed APHIS members and ARS teams to assist producers on the ground during outbreaks. Our industry has created a working group. We've put together veterinarians, disease prevention experts, and retired government officials to come up with an industry plan, and we would love to share that plan, not just with this committee, but with every member and with USDA. And I know Proposition 2 and Proposition 12 have come up in this room this morning. I am a California egg producer, and I'm a very proud California egg producer. And we operate under different production standards in our state, and there's a handful of other states that do as well.
Mr. Rance, your time is expiring. If you maybe make a few final comments, and then we can ask you some further questions.
Okay, I would like to thank this committee for your time today. It has been the experience of a lifetime, and I will never forget it.
Thank you very much for being here. Mr. Hopkins, please begin when you're ready.
Chairman Mann, Ranking Member Costa, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I serve on the executive board of the American Sheep Industry Association and am here to represent the country's 100,000 lamb and wool producing farms and ranches. We view the bipartisan version of the Farm Bill passed by this committee last May very favorably. In fact, from our membership's perspective, it may be the best farm bill we've ever seen. ASI appreciates the last two extensions of the 2018 Farm Bill. However, in spite of the committee's best efforts, we are greatly concerned that the orphan programs were not included in the most recent extension. We ask that you include them in the next moving vehicle. The importance of those programs cannot be overstated. Ultimately, the reauthorization of the Farm Bill and the infrastructure it provides is paramount for the survival of our industry and our continued ability to provide the wool that clothes American servicemen and women and the American lamb that feeds your constituents. A large share of the U.S. wool clip did not receive a bid for purchase in 2024, and we are now in the shearing season for this year's clip. The trade war with China in 2018 blew up our single largest market for American wool. That loss was shortly followed by the pandemic that shuttered wool textile mills across the world and wiped out demand for most wool garments. That demand has yet to return to full strength, and buyers continue taking advantage of the prices of our stockpile. Current marketing loan rates have not been updated in nearly 25 years. Therefore, your efforts to update the loan rate in last year's bill were greatly appreciated, and we strongly support that change being included in the current effort. For some producers, the program is their only wool marketing tool. Further, please consider us in any future support resulting from unfair trade practices of our competitors. We encourage continued support of USDA's FAS programs, which support the opening of new markets of our products. Reliance on China alone is risky, as they have more wool textile processing equipment than the balance of the world combined. This month's USDA inventory report revealed an increase in the nation's sheep herd, due largely to the rapid expansion of solar and fire prevention grazing. Yet producers are dealing with record high input prices and depressed markets. The lamb market at the wholesale level has been stagnant for the past year, and any uptick is quickly dampened by imported lamb from Australia and New Zealand, portions of which were up over 33% last year. These conditions highlight the volatility we struggle with, particularly given neither a futures market nor a hedge against market downturns exists for us. Last spring, USDA RMA issued a report evaluating risk management tools available to the industry or lack thereof. The report acknowledged our need for a quality risk management tool, but ultimately did not provide recommendations. We therefore ask the committee to direct the Secretary to provide recommendation for a viable, specific sheep management tool. 1/3 of America's sheep herd is under the watch of an H-2A sheep herder. Overtime payments required by certain states and the mandated salary increase forced on sheep producers by the Department of Labor's use of the adverse effect wage rate methodology are literally driving ranchers out of business. Salary alone in California, the second largest sheep producing state, is nearly $58,000 annually per herder. This, combined with the mandate that we provide the herders with food, board, clothing, while also covering application and visa fees, has driven our costs to an untenable level. California has lost nearly 15% of sheep production over the last 2 years alone. Research by Wyoming wool growers shows that Wyoming, the third largest sheep producing state, is dealing with similar result. ASI appreciates the prompt reaction of the administration with great support from members of Congress to bring USDA Aphids Wildlife Services personnel back online last month. Millions of head of livestock are protected from coyotes and other predators via an agency that is uniquely important to us. ASI strongly supports USDA's minor drug use development programs. The cost of bringing a new animal drug to market is rising, and many pharmaceutical companies are not investing in such development. The lack of access to these products, which are used by our competitors, creates a disadvantage. While imported lamb may be treated with a foreign drug, that same product is often not approved for use here by the FDA. In summary, ASI thanks you for including our priorities last year and believes that the reauthorization of a similar farm bill is crucial to all of our members. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Mr. Schweitzer, please begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman Mann, Ranking Member Costa, for the invitation to testify today. My name is Walter Schweitzer, and I'm president of Montana Farmers Union. I'm a third-generation Montana farmer. All of my grandparents homesteaded in Montana. I raised registered black Angus cattle, hay, and grain. I am also an international ag consultant and have been involved in international trade. My testimony today will be mostly about two themes: competitive markets and reducing uncertainty. I believe we must build a more resilient food system, one that is more diverse than the one we have today, with additional local and regional production markets and infrastructure. During the pandemic, we saw how fragile our highly consolidated food system is. But it doesn't have to be that way. When I first started farming, we had several packing plants, flour mills, bakeries, and home-delivered milk in most of our major communities. Now almost all of these are gone. We had family-owned grocery stores in every small community that had Montana food on its shelves. Now, most of our food produced in Montana is shipped 1,000 miles away to be processed, packaged, and then shipped back to corporate-owned grocery stores. This is not a resilient food system, and our food security is at risk. We can start addressing these problems by focusing on one of the Montana's biggest businesses, the cattle industry. Prices are relatively high today, but market volatility and uncertainty will remain high without more oversight of competition laws. For beef, just 4 firms control more than 80% of the packing. Cattle ranchers are hesitant to reinvest in rebuilding their herds when they are at the mercy of 4 large multinational corporations. We must push back against these monopolies with strong enforcement of competition laws. For over a century, the Packers Stockyard Act has protected the ability of independent family farmers and ranchers to compete in a fair and open marketplace without fear of retaliation or discrimination. But those protections had eroded until the last few years. Recent updates to the Packard Stockyard Act strengthen protections for family livestock producers. Lawmakers should maintain those common sense farmer-focused actions. We should better equip the USDA to enforce these rules by passing the Meat and Poultry Special Investigator Act, which could dedicate more resources to fight monopolistic practices in the livestock markets. The cattle sector would be more competitive with the passage of the Cattle Price Discovery and Transparency Act to ensure a robust cash market for cattle. Passing and enforcing a strong agricultural right to repair law would save American farmers $4 billion per year in repair costs and $3 billion in crop loss due to downtime each year. Another way to address the lack of competition is by starting our own marketing channels. Montana Farmers Union worked with several direct-to-market producers to form meat processing cooperatives, the Montana Premium Processing Cooperative and the Glacier Processing Cooperative, that leveraged USDA grants and low-interest loans to build new plants. Ranchers in our co-ops now have additional markets, and consumers have more choices to purchase local food. We also need to make sure that consumers know what they're buying. Truthful and accurate labels are important to American producers and helpful for consumers. That's why Farmers Union supports the bipartisan American Beef Labeling Act, which requires mandatory country of origin labeling for beef. I urge you to reinstate COOL to make markets fair and more competitive for the American cattle producer. There are many livestock producers who are facing uncertainty due to early actions by the administration to pause federal grants and layoffs of tens of thousands of employees. Some Montana farmers and ranchers voluntarily enrolled in the USDA conservation and programs to improve their farm operation. Many farmers have been told that they're not being reimbursed. Even if the funds eventually come, the uncertainty is bad for long-term planning. I hope this subcommittee will keep a close eye on these cuts and how they affect farmers and ranchers. Finally, one of the best ways to reduce uncertainty in this livestock sector is to advance a strong farm bill that includes improved livestock disaster and insurance offerings. The farm bill is long overdue, and I urge you to push back against proposed agricultural, conservation, and nutrition cuts. I believe that investing in food security is national security and should be as much of a priority as investing in our military. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Great. Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Sander. Please proceed when you're ready.
Chairman Mann, Ranking Member Costa, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the invitation to share a cattle producer's perspective on the state of the livestock industry. My name is Troy Sander. I am the Chief Operating Officer for Heritage Beef, a Kansas-based cattle feeding business, and the current president of the Kansas Livestock Association. I am also a proud member of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, or NCBA, where I just concluded my time as chairman of the Live Cattle Marketing Committee. NCBA has been the trusted leader and definitive voice of the U.S. cattle industry since 1898. NCBA today represents over 25,000 direct members and approximately 178,000 through its 44 state affiliate organizations. As the chair of one of NCBA's 7 policy committees, I have seen firsthand our century-old grassroots policymaking process at work. Every member has a voice in that process, and it is on behalf of these cattle-producing families that I testify before you today. In general, and certainly more so than at any time in the recent past, I am pleased to report that the state of the cattle industry is healthy and strong. We are seeing cyclically high prices for fed cattle feeders, calves, and cows, and even setting new price records in some cases. While much of this can be attributed to tight cattle supplies, beef demand has also held strong in the face of inflation and tighter household incomes. Consumers know that beef is a nutrient-dense and efficient source of protein, and that it is largely why they keep coming back for more. Not to mention it tastes pretty good, which we got to experience last night. While we maintain a positive outlook in our industry, we're also not immune to the challenges that face all of production agriculture. Input costs such as feed, fuel, labor, and even regulatory compliance represent the greatest threat to producer profitability. To put it into perspective, as prices have nearly doubled over the last 4 years, my margin is roughly the same. As Congress explores ways to support cattle producers, I would draw your attention to the following points. As I stated earlier, much of the support for these high prices is because of strong beef demand. One of the greatest tools ever designed to grow and maintain beef demand is the beef checkoff system. This widely supported and successful program uses the pooled resources of cattle producers across the country to open new markets abroad, drive sales domestically, and conduct research into the human nutrition benefits of incorporating beef in a healthy diet. Cornell University estimates that those who pay into the beef checkoff see a roughly $13.41 return on every dollar invested. Despite this, the checkoff has come under fire from a small minority of dissatisfied producers whose voices have been amplified by the radical animal rights industrial complex. The simple fact is this: the beef checkoff works. It does so with rigorous oversight under producer direction and at zero cost to the taxpayer. NCBA urges lawmakers to reject any legislative or regulatory attempts to dismantle commodity checkoff programs. Finding and keeping a workforce is another major challenge in the cattle industry. Domestic farm labor is extremely hard to come by, and as a result, we struggle to maintain operational certainty. Although programs like H-2A exist to help with the farm workforce, it favors crop production because it is entirely a seasonal program. The cattle industry needs refinements to H-2A to make it a year-round, more successful, efficient, and streamlined program. NCBA was pleased that the Biden administration withdrew its disastrous rule, deceptively titled Fair and Competitive Livestock and Poultry Markets. Government handouts and central planning is not the solution to market challenges. However well-meaning this rule may have been, the fact is it would have wreaked havoc on the small producers it was intended to help. And this rule is not the only example of that. Whether it's the Endangered Species Act, National Environmental Policy Act, climate sideboards on conservation programs, or waters of the United States, NCBA urges Congress to rein in regulatory overreach everywhere it exists. There are many other important issues I simply do not have time to address, and I would ask that you please examine my written testimony. In closing, Mr. Chairman, cattle producers are tough and resilient people who tackle new challenges with determination and grit. NCBA is ready to work with this subcommittee, the administration, and anyone to ensure a bright future for the next generation of America's cattle producers. Thank you, Chairman Mann, and I will now stand for questions.
Thank you all for your important testimony here this morning. At this time, members will be recognized for questions in order of seniority, alternating between the majority and minority members, and in order of arrival for those who joined after the hearing convened. They'll be recognized for 5 minutes each in order to allow all of us to get as many questions in as possible. To begin, I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes. Thank you all for being here this morning. First question will be for you, Mr. Sander. Can you speak to the growth in demand that you're seeing for the cattle industry, and what's the outlook overall for prices as you think about where the beef industry is today and where it's headed?
You know, a lot of the high prices and record high prices that we are currently experiencing today go back to just simple supply and demand. We're at a point in the cattle cycle, which occurs about every 5 to 7 years, where we see herd reductions because it wasn't so great of an environment a few years back. And so as supplies go down, prices go up. But I also contribute, as I said in my testimony, a lot of our continued robust demand has to go to both the beef checkoff system and also robust export markets as well.
Great, thank you. Next question for you, Mr. Zimmerman. In your written testimony, you stated that the Biden administration's proposed salmonella framework lacks a scientific basis and introduces a policy that is logistically unfeasible, financially burdensome for the industry, and is likely to increase food costs, waste, and threaten food security. Please expand on the flaws of the proposal and provide an overview of all the important work that the industry is already carrying out to reduce the risks associated with salmonella.
Obviously, foodborne illness is a concern for our industry, and we take many steps and strides to mitigate the risk in our processing plants. But the proposed framework proposed by the administration has highly flawed and potentially illegal. Salmonella is inherent in poultry, and to declare it an adulterant is just not legally sound. We take many steps to address the situation and decrease the loads, from farmers like me who regularly monitor for salmonella to processing plants who, have many steps to try to limit its spread. But to go so far as to declare it an adulterant is nearly impossible. Bacteria are everywhere. We'll do what we can do to limit the risk, but to go as far as they have in this rule is just not legally or scientifically possible.
Yep. I agree. Thank you. Next question for you, again, Mr. West and also Mr. Zimmerman. You both know all too well about the havoc that HIPATH has wreaked across the poultry industry. I was pleased to see President Trump and Secretary Rollins' announcement last week directing additional money to improve biosecurity, fund indemnity, and conduct research on vaccines and therapeutics. How do you both feel that last week's announcement, how do you feel about the announcement and the impact that it'll have on our poultry producers? Maybe we'll start with you, Mr. Zimmerman, and then let you conclude, Mr. West.
As I outlined, we're very thankful for the attention this issue has been raised, and we're thankful for the plan that has been brought forward. But we want to be very clear that this plan needs to address the virus and not just one species. Turkeys are not just big chickens, and we have our own set of concerns. So any plan moving forward, we would hope that turkey farmers would also be included, and it would encompass the entire spectrum of other species that are also affected. Dairy cattle, we're seeing in cats, rodents, and other issues. So the plan needs to be a little bit more holistic and address the virus as a whole, but we're thankful for the initial steps.
Okay. Further comments for you, Mr. Weston? You talked about some in your testimony, but feel free to expand.
I would echo Mr. Zimmerman's comments. It gives us a clearer path for our future. A vaccine is another tool in our tool chest that we can use. I would like to describe the conditions on our farm where we've been hit twice with AI. Within 10 kilometers of our ranch, we have 40 dairies. We have about 10 million broiler chickens. We have about 4 million laying hens. And about 10 miles to the south of us, we have the largest nature preserve west of the Mississippi, I believe. So in our particular instance, we believe a vaccine would be very helpful and would ensure the health of those birds in that neighborhood.
Great. Well, thank you all again for being here this morning and for your testimony. Next, I will recognize Ranking Member Costa for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I don't know, Mr. West, if you want to enhance your comments. You talked about your plan, and for the record, I'd like to submit the plan that you are implementing if there's no objection.
No objection.
Thank you. Do you want to expand any more on that, Mr. West?
Well, are you referring to the working group that we've established in our industry?
Correct.
Yes, we are working on the first draft of that as we speak, and as soon as that is ready, we will be ready to deliver that. I do not know a time frame on that. I would guess, I don't want to guess, Mr. Costa.
You made your comments, Mr. West, about our valley's incredible productivity in terms of not only the poultry development in your area, but also the dairy industry. And you have cooperated, because I know I've represented both industries and many others. How's the cooperation going these days with over 70% of the herds in California, dairy herds in California, being impacted by the high-path avian flu? How would you describe that relationship?
I would describe it as friendly, and I would describe it as perhaps a little secretive. We know what's going on our farms, and we don't know what's going on theirs. And we would like to work together with that industry and others locally, regionally, nationally to come up with a plan. In many neighborhoods where you see laying hens, you will see dairy cows, and you will see a lot of other forms of agriculture.
Well, I think that's something we need to continue to work on, not just in California, but around the country, because of the way this high-path avian flu has taken shape. Do any of you witnesses here care to comment on the impacts of potential tariffs on our trading partners in Canada and Mexico, and your concerns?
Yes, thank you. I can address that question. I mean, as I mentioned before, 25% of our pork products are exported. That adds $66 worth of value. Our trading partners like Canada and Mexico are concerned. We export. Mexico is our #1 market for exports, so any type of disruptions are of concern, especially the retaliatory tariffs that might come back to us. I think it's also important to note that we, as an industry, get young weaned pigs from Canada that would be affected by those tariffs also, which would add cost to our producers. Those pigs are raised in states like Minnesota and Iowa. So we have a very integrated industry. We work well together, and certainly concerned with any type of disruptions and retaliatory tariffs that might come our way.
And that's the thing. Each country has the ability to invoke retaliatory tariffs, so it's a two-way street. Anyone else care to comment?
Yeah, you know, the U.S. is the largest beef exporter in the world. We're also one of the largest beef importers in the world. Tariffs hit us both ways on that. In Montana, we have a good working relationship with Canada. Most of our feeder calves go north to the border to be finished, fed out, and many of them come back to the United States to be processed. Most of our inputs for growing our feed come from Canada. So these tariffs would have a very adverse impact on the cattle ranchers of Montana.
So you agree they're a tax on American consumers and American producers?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I've carried the funding legislation for Animal Health Laboratory, National Animal Disease Preparedness, the Response Program, the National Animal Vaccine, and vet countermeasures, and I'm proud to continue to carry those appropriations. Mr. Zimmerman, would you agree that without these critical resources, our food supply would be even more at risk?
I would wholeheartedly agree. The first step in combating a virus outbreak such as HPAI is surveillance.
So we need to keep these folks on board and not have them terminated, correct?
They were already short-staffed, so any further cuts to staff would be detrimental, yes.
I agree. Biosecurity continues to be a main pillar, I think, in combating high-path avian flu, but we also have strong herd health here in the United States. Mr. Schweitzer, you mentioned in your testimony you could expand on why ear tags and other measuring of biosecurity are worthy investments. Quickly comment, I've run out of time.
It's, food security is a national security.
We both agree.
And herd health is national security. And it's definitely important, and our herd health is at risk without good traceability. It's a public good, and it should be, the cost of herd health should be borne by public, not the producers, not the feeders, not the packers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time's expired.
Next, we'll recognize the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Bacon, for 5 minutes.
Appreciate y'all being here. Agriculture is the economic engine for Nebraska, so I appreciate your expertise. So I have a question for our beef experts here and our pork experts. Just tell me the importance of USMCA here to these two industries.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bacon. Love the last name there. Once again, trade is so important to our industry. I mean, when you look at the pork industry, trade helps provide that balance. We export more than we import, and so Mexico is our #1 export market. They love our pork down there. Canada's, I believe, #5. So both of them are important to us, and the work of USMCA has been good for all three of us countries, I should say, and certainly want to continue those type of relationships in the future too.
How about for our beef side?
Yeah, we are extremely glad for the export trade that we have. We value it at about $425 a head for every animal that we produce, is the value of exports to us. So we are excited about new markets and expanding current markets, and we fully understand that this is a very important part of our production system.
Question for you both, a follow-up. I understand some retribution towards Mexico. They were blocking our corn and doing some other things. But as Canada, to my knowledge, they've lived up to the USMCA, so I'm trying to just get my arms around I'm not sure responding to Canada with tariffs is appropriate, but has Canada been living up to the USMCA agreement? And if anybody knows differently, please let me know.
Well, I believe they have been living up to the agreement, but I think the agreement needs a few improvements. First and foremost, country of origin labeling. Secondly, they can dump their grains, wheat especially, into the U.S. market, but we are not allowed to export our wheat into the Canadian markets. This is clearly an important addition that needs to be made to the USMCA.
That's a great input. Anybody else? Okay, go ahead.
Well, I would just say that the trade and exports are complex, and as I mentioned, we get weaned pigs from Canada into the U.S. in Iowa and Minnesota, and those are good, healthy pigs that are harvested in our plants. And so we have an integrated industry, and that's why we need to continue to find ways to work together. I realize it may not be perfect for all species, but for the pork industry, it has worked well for us.
One of the big concerns I have, we were a net trade exporter 4 years ago. Not a huge trade surplus, but there was one. Now we have the biggest trade deficit in agriculture in our history. And I think it's part of the factors why we're nearing a recession in the in the agriculture sector. That's very concerning for me. A follow-up question to Mr. Sander and Mrs. Stavermer. There were recent cuts, federal cuts to the Meat Animal Research Center, otherwise known as the MARC in Nebraska, and a lot of these researchers lost their jobs. Can you explain the importance of our nation's research efforts to agriculture? We'll start with you, ma'am.
Well, I would say all of us in agriculture, especially those of us that graduated from land-grant universities, want to continue to see that research happen there. I mean, that information that research uncovers helps drive our industry, it helps drive the innovation, and it's important work. It fuels the next maybe vaccine, animal health program, and so need to continue to have that support in those areas, yes, so that our industry can continue to be vibrant, can continue to face the challenges that we have, and continue to be a leader in the world.
Yes, sir.
Yes, our ability to prevent and respond to a foreign disease outbreak is paramount, and it would be devastating for our industry. And so we support, funding to continue that initiative. We were very glad to see the Trump administration rehire federal employees that are important to protecting the U.S. cattle herd, including research from APHIS and employees from the USFS.
As someone who worked hard to get the FMD vaccine bank funded back in 2017, I appreciate the great work our researchers do. And I think with 4 seconds left, I'm going to yield it all back to you.
Very generous, Mr. Bacon. Thank you. I now recognize the gentlewoman from Connecticut, Mrs. Hayes, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. And thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Last month, the President issued an executive order instructing agencies to plan for large-scale reductions in force and fired thousands of probationary employees. To your point, the rehiring of those employees would not have had to take place if they weren't fired without cause to begin with. Loan officers at the Farm Service Agency who help farmers secure financial investments to run or expand their operations were fired. These firings also impacted the Economic Research Service at USDA, which produces reports and data on the farm economy. In the middle of an outbreak of bird flu, which has led to the death of over 165 million birds, President Trump and Elon Musk fired a quarter of the staff at the National Animal Health Laboratory Network programs and hundreds of employees at the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Services, which have been responding to the spread of the disease. The Trump administration is now struggling to rehire these important employees as bird flu spreads from poultry flocks to dairy herds in 17 states and has tragically resulted in at least one human death. Mr. West, in your testimony, you indicated that current egg shortages and high egg prices are directly linked to the outbreak of bird flu. You also mentioned that the federal hiring freezes left 26 new hires at the National Poultry Research Center unsure of whether they were supposed to start their jobs. Can you elaborate more on the impact of those large-scale firings and hiring freezes, the impact that they have on the ability of egg producers to respond to the bird flu? And additionally, what resources do farmers need to respond and recover from this outbreak and provide stability to the egg market?
I would like to talk about research first. During our outbreaks, we had full USDA staff on our farms. We did not have anybody that was short labor on our farm during our outbreaks. When I talked about labor shortages, I talked about techs in labs doing samples for avian influenza or coryza or whatever other poultry disease they might be looking for. I did not see any labor shortages on the farm.
But aren't those techs equally as important as the people who are actually on the farm in order to combat an outbreak of bird flu?
That is exactly right. And I believe that those positions were left untouched, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm going off of memory here, ma'am, so I might be wrong.
Okay, well, you can submit that later. But the point is, making those types of cuts without surgical precision and an understanding of the impact that would have would leave us in a bad spot should an outbreak occur that we cannot plan for. So it's not just the workers on the farm, but the technicians in the lab and all of those highly specialized employees are very important to the lifespan of this process. I have another question, but Mr. Schweitzer, you seem to be jumping out of your seat. Would you like to respond?
You know, the cuts have had an impact in Montana, no doubt about it, both in predator control for our sheep industry, and for health of our livestock, and for programs for the U.S., for the Montana farmers and ranchers. Right now, many farmers are going in to get their operating loans renewed. Mm-hmm. And the bankers are dismissing any support from the U.S. government. If you take that out of our bottom line, we're not going to get our loans renewed.
Yes, thank you. I can tell you that it's also had an effect in Connecticut. I was approached at a parade by a father who wanted to tell me the story of his daughter, who was a shellfish expert, Marine veteran, highly recruited by the USDA, and happened to be a probationary employee in that role, although she had served 25 years in other agencies and departments in a highly specialized field as a shellfish expert. I'll submit my other questions for the record. With that, I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Baird, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and ranking members. So I'm going to start, Mr. Hopkins. As you know, all orphan programs were left unfunded at the end of the last Congress. Can you speak to the importance of the orphan programs such as the sheep production and marketing grants and the need for continued funding?
Thank you, Congressman. Yes, the orphan programs are critical to the sheep industry. The programs, as I understand it, in the past have been too small for CBO to score those in the baseline, and as a result of that, they always have to be listed in the Farm Bill as separate programs, which creates a lot of problems, especially when there's a CR that has to be done. Last year in the Farm Bill that this committee released in May, you combined many of those orphan programs into I believe it was a fiber trust fund, to make sure that they would be in the baseline, and we are greatly pleased that you were able to do that. And if you can continue to do that in the new Farm Bill, I think we would be very satisfied that problem that's been with us for a while would get resolved. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any of the other witnesses have any thoughts in this arena? If not, I'll move on to Mrs. Stevermer. You talk about how the U.S. pork industry is dependent on vitamins manufactured in China due to the limited production that we have, and in some cases, there being no other country of origin options to meet the industry volume demands. While this is not within the jurisdiction of the Ag Committee, what recommendations do you have to Congress for addressing this issue?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And as I did mention, there are certain vitamins, trace minerals, and amino acids, that we can only get from China. And so my ask would be that as we continue to have conversations about our relationship with China going forward, to keep that in mind, because if we are unable to source them, or if the cost of those go up significantly, it will impact our producers' bottom lines.
Thank you. Do any other witnesses have any remarks in this regard? So I'm going to move on to another area. So Mr. Sander, do you and your organization have any position regarding USDA's investments into small and regional meat and poultry processing capacity? And given the policy preferences, as a general rule, is it preferable to have Congress authorize these programs or have administration do it?
Yeah. You know, obviously, we will at some point end up rebuilding our herd, maybe not to levels that we've seen in the past due to inflation and taxes and land values. But we will see, again, a time where we have a large supply of cattle that need to go through the processing plants and the packing plants. And so we are absolutely 100% supportive of programs to help small and regional packers overcome the high costs of the startup and provide more hook space for our product.
Do any of the other witnesses have?
Yes. You know, Montana, prior to the COVID pandemic, we eat about 100,000 head of cattle a year, but we only had the processing capacity of about 30,000. We found out during the COVID pandemic that we couldn't even feed ourselves, even though we raise over 2 million head of cows. This local regional processing is critically important for our food security and our national security. And the investments that have been made in Montana have increased, almost doubled our processing capacity. But we still have a ways to go because we eat 100,000 head. So if we can process 60,000, we're still short 40,000.
Thank you. Anyone else? We got about 21 seconds. If not, I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman yields, and I recognize the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. Feenstra, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having this committee meeting. I want to thank our witnesses. I read your testimonies, and they're very impressive. You know, we got some exciting times in the U.S. and what's happening in the commodity markets and things like that, but we also have some concerns. I am from northwest or western Iowa, where we have some of the largest livestock production in the country, livestock, turkey, egg laying, you name it, we lead in these industries, pork and so forth. But the great problem that we're having and the worry that we're having is foreign animal disease and obviously high-path avian influenza. Obviously, it's killed over 140 million birds already. It's catastrophic, and we're seeing it getting into cattle. We're seeing it get into mice and rats and cats and dogs. I significantly worry about hogs, which I want to talk about a little bit. But I'm excited that the Secretary Rollins came out with a robust strategy last week, and this was after a letter that I helped lead with others concerning the development from the USDA and what can be done. Obviously, the investment has to be in biosecurity, farm relief, vaccine research, and other considerations. So I want to talk to Mr. Zimmerman and Mr. West. Obviously, Mr. Zimmerman, National Turkey Federation, thanks for being here. I think the world of your organization and what you do. I have one of your producers here is going to go with me tonight to hear the State of the Union. And then Mr. West, United Egg Council, thanks for being here. Obviously, I have one of the largest egg producers in the country. 14% of the eggs come from one of my owners, and it's great to have you here. So between you two, what areas of research should be our priority that we can best implement and move forward on this strategy of trying to find a solution to high-path aviation influenza? Mr. Zimmerman, what is your thoughts on this?
We've come a long way since 2014 when this virus first emerged in the Midwest, and we've come a long way with our biosecurity. There's still room for improvement, and any research there is obviously helpful, but we need to do more than just biosecurity. So as we look towards a vaccination program, we need to research how that could be rolled out, because obviously we're not going to be able to jab every bird out there. It's just not possible. But what birds should we protect first? I mean, egg layers maybe our breeding stock, but we have to have those discussions of how a vaccine could be implemented, and then we also have to address the trade issues, obviously, to make that happen.
Is that going to be the big issue? That trade issue concerns me a lot. So you start vaccinating, you know, it's different than egg layers, but for turkeys, is this going to be a big issue for you?
It can be a big issue. You know, we have to weigh how many birds are we depopulating versus how large our export markets are, and we're at that point. So we really need to look into how we can vaccinate and not harm trade. In 2014, we know the CVOs got together and discussed this issue, and alleviated a lot of the trade concerns. So we would hope that in the future we can have those discussions so we can start concentrating and looking at vaccine, because honestly, I think that's our path forward.
Yeah, I agree. I had a couple turkey farms get hit in Buena Vista County and Sac County and stuff like that. We've got to get our arms around this. We can't continue to euthanize and indemnify. I mean, we've got to find solutions, and I appreciate that. Mr. West, we've had a lot of discussions on this topic. Worried. What is your thoughts? What can we do to move forward? What is the solution here?
Well, there's a lot of solutions, and there needs to be research at every level of this virus. I spoke in my testimony about a working industry group working with the USDA and working through some of these issues. Chief among them for our industry is when and where do we vaccinate the birds? At what age? In what facility? Do we do it at a hatchery? Do we do it in a brooder house where we take a day-old baby chick and raise her to 16 to 17 to 18 weeks? Do we do it there? We do not want to do it in a lay house. It would be operationally nearly impossible.
That's right, it would. Yep. Ms. Stevermeer, what is your thought? I mean, I'm worried about it getting into hog. Obviously, we're worried about African swine fever, but where do you see this moving forward, and how can we all work together and find a solution here?
I would just say it goes back to our three-legged animal health stool that we talk about, the importance of the labs that are doing the diagnostic work, the surveillance that we have in place there, and also our biosecurity. So it's upon all of us as an industry, as livestock industries, to be in communication with each other. I know our staff veterinarians are on those calls on High Path and making sure that our lab capacity is there and that we have the science and innovation to work on vaccines.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for your testimonies. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. The chairman recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Riley, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. I want to follow up on what my colleague was talking about with bird flu. It's very, very concerning for a lot of reasons. We just had a bird flu outbreak in Ulster County in my district in January. We had another one in Delaware County just last week. And of course, we've seen what's been happening with egg prices. Mr. West, I wanted to ask you this question. I share your concerns about the damage this virus is causing. And I agree with colleagues on both sides of the aisle that we really got to get it under control. I'm an original co-sponsor of a bipartisan bill that Congressman Costa and others are leading, the Healthy Poultry Assistance Indemnification Act. And my understanding is under current law, farmers will get compensated if they have to depopulate a farm where bird flu is found, but that the folks who are in the surrounding control areas also have to take measures, but they don't get compensated. And so our bill would allow them to be compensated for the economic impacts that they face. I know that this bill is supported by the American Farm Bureau Federation, the National Chicken Council, and the United Egg Producers. And I was just hoping you could take a couple minutes to make the case for folks here why this bill is so important.
Well, the control zone in each neighborhood. Let me describe the process. When there's an avian influenza case, there's a circle around that farm. It can be 5 kilometers, it can be 10 kilometers, and permitting needs to be done through those areas. If you have a like poultry farm in that area, you would have to do increased testing. You would have to jump through a few different hoops to get your products moved. So we would support anything that would support that farmer next door to get his product moved.
Great. No, I appreciate that. Ms. Stevermeer, I had a question about, in your testimony, you talked about how American farmers are forced to rely on China for a lot of vitamins. And you listed some things like B12, thiamine, folic acid that are made almost exclusively in China. You said that China makes about 80% to 100% of various other vitamins. And I'm just curious, why exactly is that the case? And are there things we should be doing with American public policy to start trying to lessen our dependence on China for this stuff?
I would say that process happened through time as economic and environmental pressures were here in the U.S. on those particular manufacturing plants. They went elsewhere into China. And so I don't have a specific answer. If there were any plants that were going to be built, it's going to take time to get those built and permitting for that to happen. So I think in the meantime, once again, keeping in mind that they come from China, many of those trace minerals and amino acids, and continue to have that thought in mind when we have conversations on a relationship with China.
Yeah. So, but there's not like some sort of structural or scientific or technical reason we're depending on China for this stuff. Like we could, if we put our minds to it and made the investments, we could scientifically we could probably do this here in America. Is that your sense?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. It just seems like, I mean, this is the thing across so much of the country, and certainly in my district in upstate New York, where we have been, the economy has just been hollowed out because we've ceded ground to China and other competitors around the world. We used to make stuff in America, and something as simple, maybe I guess I shouldn't say as simple, I'm sure making vitamins is probably very complex scientifically, but when you're telling me that 100% of these vitamins that our farmers need, we're depending on China for that makes absolutely no sense to me. And so maybe we could look into ways to start making stuff in America again. I'll yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentlewoman from Indiana. Mrs. Miller?
Illinois.
Oh, Illinois.
We're neighbors. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate hearing from producers. As a cattle producer myself, I understand the importance of promoting American beef and protecting our food safety in the country. I am concerned that other countries don't live up to the standards that United States has for, say, raising cattle. Mr. Sander, do you share these concerns when it comes to the importation of beef from other countries such as Brazil and Paraguay?
You know, we do spend a lot of our time talking about the value of exports to our business, and probably need to also spend as much time about talking about imports. And as you mentioned, Brazil and Paraguay enjoy beef access to the U.S. market, but this needs to be immediately ceased, in our opinion, because they have proven they are either unable or unwilling to adhere to global animal health and food safety standards that we are held to here in the U.S.
Thank you. And I do find it troubling that the United States is importing so much beef from other countries that put the U.S. cattle herd at risk for contracting dangerous diseases such as the foot and mouth disease. Could you explain to us what would happen in the U.S. if there was an FMD outbreak and why it is so important to protect our cattle from these diseases?
You know, as it currently stands, if we would be devastated with such an outbreak, there would immediately be a minimum of a 72-hour stop movement on cattle. And as you all are aware, we have a perishable product, and we can't stop the production process. The process needs to move. And so among other costly, devastating effects, that would be the one, obviously, that would happen quickly. And we just can't stand to have that type of a disease enter our shores.
Lastly, the USDA January cattle inventory report showed us that the cattle inventory in the U.S. has been at its lowest since 1995. What can Congress do to support cattle producers to get that number back up and for us to have a thriving beef market?
So, you know, at the end of the day, in the cattle business, we are margin managers. And there's, you know, 3 ways that you can help protect your margins, and that is pay less for your input costs, produce your product more efficiently, or sell it for more. And keeping burdensome costs and burdensome government overreach in check, and helping us to reduce our costs in the production process is absolutely what we need to help us stay profitable and manage our margins.
Yes, and we know that inflation is driven by out-of-control government spending and energy costs, so we're going to ramp that back.
I absolutely agree.
Now, Mrs. Steffenberg, you mentioned that the pork industry is suffering from a shortage of labor across sectors. What changes to the H-2A program would you
For us, making the H-2A program year-round, having those be year-round foreign-born workers would be key. Our pigs don't just grow for 9 months. We need workers 12 months of the year, so that year-round access to those H-2A workers would be key.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentleman from North Carolina.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank in particular Chairman Mann and Ranking Member Costa for organizing this important subcommittee hearing today. The topic is very important for Eastern North Carolina. Livestock sales are 49% of agriculture sales in North Carolina's 1st District, over 23 million in livestock inventory. The financial situation of our producers is top of my mind every day. In Eastern North Carolina, our top industry is agriculture, to be clear. The jobs tied to the agriculture industry directly support, and we know this, our local grocery store, the local banks, the local tractor store, and many, many others. Over the course of this last weekend, I was fortunate enough to be able to go out to Nearooka Natural Farm. It's a 7th-generation family-owned, operated farm, and we did a ribbon cutting. And I'm saying this to say I believe strongly that we need to do everything possible to keep our farmers and producers in business and in good financial standing so that they can continue to feed and clothe the American people. We talked about animal health today over the course of this hearing. It remains in the news, so I'm going to come back to the topic. HPAI, the outbreak, the bird flu epidemic continues to be top of mind. That raises the fear for producers back home that others could spread and that they could jump from one livestock to another. Staffing shortages, as we've also alluded to, these are not easing fears. I want to specifically narrow down my question here, Mr. Zimmerman. USDA Secretary Rollins recently announced USDA's HPAI strategy, and turkey seems to not be included. And I would like to know, how has the turkey industry been affected, and what would inclusion mean?
Well, thank you. We hope it was just an oversight. Obviously, the price of eggs is in the spotlight now, so we hope that turkey will be included in the future. Turkeys are a more long-lived bird, and so they have more time to be exposed to the virus. So our industry as a whole, on a percentage, and nothing to denigrate the damage to the egg industry, but we've been hit really hard, and we were some of the first to be hit in the previous outbreak in 2014 and 2015. So we just want it to be included, and I think the major point is that we need to treat this as a virus, not as a specific species. This is in dairy cattle, it's in cats, it's in mice, it's in chickens, it's in ducks, and so that any solution to this virus needs to be holistic in approach and include all of us, so we can all, be rid of this terrible virus.
Thank you so much. I'm going to see how we can do with the last 2 minutes of my time here. I would love to hear from all of the witnesses, if you can just keep it like to a sentence, a one-liner that could capture what concerns, if any, do you have about the impact of a potential retaliatory tariffs? Whichever way you want to start.
I'll start. We import a lot of our baby turkeys and our eggs from Canada. So obviously imports rising, and then Mexico is our largest trading partner. Obviously that's a great concern that we, in a time where we're in a very stressful time, we can't afford to lose those exports and have our import prices increase.
I would say our farmers are very concerned with the retaliatory tariff. We went through a longest period of unprofitability, lost average of $30 a head. We're starting to make a little bit of money now. Any type of retaliatory tariff that disrupts that market affects our profitability, and that's concerning.
Very negligible amount of product moves across our borders. We don't import or export many eggs at all, so this will have little impact on the egg industry.
The commodity prices that are so low this year and last is in large part due to the last trade war. Our largest customers were impacted during that trade war, and they looked for alternative markets. And in 2024, we had an average crop, but we lost our average market. And so our commodity prices tanked because of this. It does have an impact, and it has a long-range impact because our customers have built ports, rail, and other distribution networks to purchase their products from our competitors.
We obviously are aware of the tariffs, and as this administration works to negotiate equitable trade agreements, we would hope that they also look at possible other export opportunities for our product as well.
Well, thank you for getting through that line of questioning. 17 seconds over. Y'all are just as good as members of Congress. I yield back.
Thank you. Now recognize the gentleman from Minnesota for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd also like to thank Chairman Mann for holding this important hearing today, and thank you to the witnesses for taking time to be here with us. Southern Minnesota is a top region for livestock production, and as I stated earlier, we are a pork powerhouse, and we're very proud of that. It's an honor to represent the hardworking men and women who put high-quality, nutritious protein on our tables. With that being said, Ms. Stevermer, Prop 12, it's wreaked havoc on the marketplace, and it's hurt small and medium-sized producers. The fallout will only lead to increased consolidation as the largest producers are better equipped to conform to its arbitrary and unscientific requirements. In simple terms, can you explain to the committee why it's completely backwards to think Prop 12 is anything but detrimental to production agriculture?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Chairman Thompson for his work on language with Prop 12. What makes it somewhat chaotic and backwards is the fact that while I am fine with states regulating production practices within their own state, it does not make sense for states to regulate production practices in other states. And the fear that our producers have is that patchwork of regulations. And it doesn't matter what size you are, small or medium, you feel that effect. And it's hard to make business decisions. And the chaos that it's causing is concerning. I would say also, I have farms and producers that come up to me and say, I don't know if the next generation wants to come farm, because look at this chaos. If one state can tell another state what to do, and down the road, maybe that happens again, and we've got multiple states and multiple regulations, how do I deal with that? Why would I want to deal with that? Why do I want to come back and farm? And I think that's very disappointing for people that produce wholesome, nutritious protein. I'll also say it's chaotic because it raises food prices. The people in California are paying on average 20% more for pork. That makes no sense. That makes no sense.
Thank you for that. And in a follow-up to that, so in the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2024 that we passed in a bipartisan manner through the Ag Committee, we had a fix included for Prop 12, and you alluded to it, but do you support that fix in the language in that bill?
We do support that, yes.
All right, thank you for that. Maybe one last thought, and Mr. Riley from New York brought this up, and I think it's a very, very good point. You know, we have all our eggs in one basket when it comes to some inputs on the pork production side, and quite frankly, livestock production in general. But if you look at the amino acids, the vitamins, the minerals, it is scary to think that we all agree and say food security is national security, but yet we don't have a domestic fix to diversify our inputs. And so if we were to, from a congressional bipartisan standpoint, work on ways to reignite domestic production of amino acids, vitamins, things that are so critical to our food and national security, would the pork industry be supportive of that?
I would say we would. I mean, it's, as you said, having all our eggs in one basket is not ideal, and working through any regulatory and environmental conditions that might be out there, I think is important to making sure that we can build that industry back again.
Yeah, so to that point, I mean, these are self-inflicted wounds that we've put on ourselves, right? So we have regulated ourselves out of the marketplace to the point where our only conclusion is our customer or the deal is to be made with China. And so I think it's high time that we, again, in a bipartisan manner, work together to figure out how we can bring some of this production back to the United States. Mr. Zimmerman, I think of you often. You're a second-generation farmer, and most of your adult life you have lived as a farmer through very tough times. And so you look at the perfect storm we have going on now with high-path avian influenza and AMPV. How have these diseases separately impacted the economic livelihoods of Minnesota turkey growers, and what advice would you provide members of Congress and the USDA, and how can we best combat these impacts simultaneously?
Yeah, as I said in my oral testimony, this has been a 1-2 punch to our farmers. I'm seeing the next generation of turkey farmers just throw up their hands. They can deal with one thing. HPI has been great because there's been indemnity. With AMPV, there has been no indemnity. So including AMPV in the livestock indemnity program would go a long way to provide some assurances to the next generation that there is some support there when they have these, these type of viral outbreaks. But more importantly, let's find a solution. We've been dealing with HPI since 2014. It's time to move on. We've spent the money on biosecurity. We need to look at vaccination. We need to get the trade issues straightened out, and we need to work towards a long-term solution because we cannot survive. We will not have a poultry and egg industry in this country if we have to continue to live with the HPAI.
Well, I've seen your kids and the way they love farming, and we owe it to them to get this right, to give them hope so they can be the third generation to take over your farm. So with that, I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentleman from California for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Mann, Ranking Member Costa. Appreciate you calling today's hearings, and thank you to our witnesses. Certainly been an informative discussion. Special welcome to my good friend and constituent, Mr. West. Nice to see you on the other side of the country here and see your friendly face.
Thank you.
Yeah, I represent one of the largest dairy and poultry districts in the country, and certainly share a lot of the concerns that have been raised here today. With the depopulation of over 160 million birds and the the impact to consumers and wholesale prices and everything else, I mean, there's a lot to be concerned about. And frankly, some of the chaotic activity that I've experienced since my arrival here in Congress 2 months ago hasn't always reassured me that we're doing what we need to do. Having said that, I certainly think, the $100 million funding that Secretary Rollins has announced and is moving forward with is the bright spot in this. And Mr. West, you and I have talked about extensively the importance of the vaccination strategy, right? I'm hoping. Well, I'm just curious if you could lay out for us what you think, how those funds can best be utilized, and what we can do as members of this committee and members of Congress to best utilize our time to support those efforts and make sure that that we do have an effective response strategy. Because like I said, certainly a lot to be concerned about. So if you could walk me through your thoughts on the best use of those funds and how we can best support that.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. I think those monies need to be spent everywhere around avian influenza, Mr. Gray. I think that it needs to start with industry groups. And I've said, I believe twice this morning, that we have established an industry group that is really excited about meeting with USDA and getting an action plan put in place. We need to be looking at things like monitoring out there in the field. We need to look at test results. We need to manage processes on the ground that we don't have guidance for at this point. And I think it makes it that much more important for us to work with government to make a clear path for everybody. Nobody wants high egg prices. Nobody wants empty egg shelves in the grocery stores. We want this problem to be over with, and I think if we work together, we can sure do that.
I appreciate that, and I'll open up the question to the rest of the panel, just a sense of what barriers or hurdles do you all see that we can be helpful in clearing as we head down this path? Open-ended question to any members. Sir.
Surveillance is key, and fully staffing our surveillance teams at the state level is very important, because if we don't know where the virus is, we can't even begin to control it. So I know recently in Minnesota that some funding has been frozen, and our state is wondering how we're going to continue to, even do basic surveillance for HPAI. So that's key number one. But then our strategic initiative, which I outlined in my written testimony, again, it's very similar to what Mr. West is talking about, getting the best and brightest in the industry together and coming up with solutions and looking at how we can use potential solutions such as vaccination to finally rid ourselves of this virus. It's going to take a lot of time and effort to come up with that plan, and we need some help, getting the people together to formulate those solutions.
Appreciate that. Thank you all for your efforts, and please consider my office a friend and ally in addressing, this very serious situation. And thank you all, and I'll yield back the rest of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, may I rise for a point of order?
Go ahead.
I'd like to enter into the record Milk Producers Council of California letter that was addressed to me. I made reference to it in my opening comments about the impacts of the poultry industry and the dairy industry with high-path avian flu. And the dairy industry, like the poultry industry, has been made available to participate and file for emergency assistance for livestock, honeybees, and other farm-raised animals. And so that's helpful with this ELAP application for milk losses due to high-path. However, the hope has been put on hold to a stop in payments for USDA, and Milk Producers Council wanted to raise that to our attention, and if we can enter the letter to the record, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. It'll be entered. Thank you. Now recognize the gentleman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of you that have been very patient on the panel today. There have been a series of questions that have popped up again about California's Prop 12, and just for the record, we know California's Prop 12 requires pork producers to increase space for their sows if they want access to the California market. It effectively banned gestation crates, a common enclosure used by the industry to protect sows and piglets during pregnancy and after birth. The premise of this law implies that hog farmers don't want their animals to be healthy and safe. And I would just ask Mrs. DeVermer, do you find that that's the case with the producers that you interact with?
The producers I interact with work closely with their veterinarians and consultants to make the best choices for their farming operation based on their management style. And Prop 12 was not based on any scientific measures. It was a number pulled out of the hat. And once again, we producers in other states had no opportunity to provide feedback, and yet it affects us. So that's part of our concern, is that patchwork and that over-regulation on our industry.
So California's law also seems to take an entirely different approach to animal safety than longstanding producer and veterinarian practices. And I wonder if you could confirm if there was any science really put in behind this decision.
No science put behind it, just arbitrarily picked out a number of 24 square feet.
Okay. Well, I understand Prop 12 went into effect just about a year ago, and I wonder if you could take a few moments to talk about the extremely difficult decisions that producers are facing on whether or not they comply with a forced mandate from California or try their best to find another market to sell into, both of which are extremely costly in the process. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, producers are making business decisions whether they should incur costs to comply to Prop 12. And while there may be some premium involved with that, there's no guarantee that premium is going to last for a long period of time. Plus, there's no guarantee that there's not going to be another state's regulation come along with a different square footage that would affect their businesses. So irregardless of your small, large, medium, compliant, non-compliant, you're concerned about that patchwork of regulations. I would say that it's gone beyond the U.S. Our trading partners, Mexico and Canada, are concerned about Prop 12. It's disruptive. I mentioned earlier that we bring piglets down from Canada into the U.S. Minnesota and Iowa are a couple of states that give a lot of those piglets. Canadian producers are affected by Prop 12 then. And so, you know, they're just struggling to see how that can affect them in that chaos. And I will state it again that within California, the USDA chief economist study showed that pork prices rose 20%. So it's affecting us as producers. Our costs are going up, but it's affecting consumers also.
Thank you. And I think you make a great point about worrying that there's going to be continued fragmentation in state laws if Congress fails to act, and I think that's going to be critically important. I want to turn to Mr. Sander, if I may, for just a moment. I did note in your testimony that California's Proposition 12, which largely focused on the hog industry, is of huge concern to the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and its members. And I wonder if you take a moment just to explain why this is so worrisome to you and other livestock producers.
Thank you for the question. You know, it becomes concerning for us when a state that produces less than 1% of the domestic hog production in the U.S. starts dictating animal husbandry practices to the rest of the country. You know, we believe in the cattle industry that, you know, I personally have spent the last 50 years, I'm not that old, but I started really young, you know, learning how to do a good job of raising livestock and animal handling and animal husbandry practices. And we are literally the original stewards of the land and of the animals, and we believe that those decisions need to be made with us, not just one state.
Well, thank you very much. And Chairman, with that, I'll yield back balance of my time.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentleman from New Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member. I appreciate the ability to wave on to today's subcommittee hearing. I represent New Mexico's 2nd District, the chili capital of the world. We produce the largest amount, over half of the country's onions in June and July, and we're also home to the Wild Turkey Grand Slam. You can hunt a Rio Grande, Merriam's, and a Gould turkey in my district, which I'm very proud of. However, we're here today to talk about livestock and dairy, two really critical industries to my district as well. Now, we have over 9,000 ranchers that raise over 1.2 million head of cattle and contribute over $2 billion to the New Mexican economy. They hold 2,200 allotments across approximately 13.5 million acres of public lands across the state. However, oftentimes, these ranchers are confronted with unnecessary bureaucratic hurdles that hinder their ability to do their jobs efficiently. That's why I'm proud to have introduced the bipartisan Ranching Without Red Tape Act, which would cut through excessive regulatory delays and provide ranchers with the flexibility that they need to make simple but critical improvements on their federal leases. So my question is to Mr. Sander. Mr. Sander, can you give me a few examples of range improvements that would trigger a lease renegotiation?
Yeah, thank you for the question. You know, as I said, our operations are in Kansas, so we don't graze many federal lands, but we do buy from a lot of folks in the West that you know, graze over more than 60% of the herd grazes federal lands, and you know, the ranches who manage those permits, as I said earlier, are some of the original stewards of this land, and they know how to take care of land. They're, you know, responsible for maintaining water troughs, pipelines, and fences are really good examples of that for you.
Thank you, Mr. Sander, and I completely agree with you, and that's why I believe my legislation is so important, and it makes common sense to cut through that red tape and cut through that regulation and not have to renegotiate a lease with the BLM or another federal land management agency. Is this something that you'd commit to working with me to help pass this legislation?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. It's also important to emphasize that this bill is not about shortcuts or sacrificing environmental oversight. However, there is another bill I want to get to before my time expires today, also another bipartisan bill I've introduced called the Grazing for Wildfire Management Act with Mr. LaMalfa. We know that well-managed grazing plays a crucial role in wildfire mitigation by reducing fuel loads. The Grazing for Wildlife Management Act would make it easier for ranchers to access public lands to reduce some of those fuels and prevent catastrophic wildfires like those in New Mexico, two of the largest that we've seen in just the last year alone. Mr. Sander, from your perspective, how would targeted grazing in these areas of increased fuel loads both contribute to wildfire prevention, overall land health, and help ranchers?
Yeah, again, we've learned a lot over the years, over many years, of how the symbiotic relationship between grazing cattle and the environment can work amazingly well at helping to not only reduce the undergrowth and the fuel that's there for fires, but also slow down the flames in the process if and when a fire does ignite. We are 100% supportive of this initiative as well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sander. And look, one of the things I appreciate about serving on this committee is that we get to work with our colleagues on common sense legislation that we hope eventually makes it into a viable farm bill as a vehicle to get this passed. And so I'm looking forward to working with my Republican colleagues on both of these initiatives, and certainly anticipate and look forward to the support from the livestock industry, cattle growers in my state who also support both of these pieces of legislation as well. And that supports livelihoods in rural communities. Now, I look forward to continuing this important work. Thank you all so much for being here today, and I look forward to having further discussions in full committee for both of these bills. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Thank you all for sharing your time and insight into this committee. Obviously, avian flu is top of mind for many members of the subcommittee here today. I'm encouraged by Secretary Rollins' timely response to the issue, and with Indiana being the 4th largest producer of turkeys in America, I'm hopeful the USDA avian flu response will expand to support our turkey farmers. Mr. Zimmerman, American farmers are the most efficient turkey producers in the world, but in your testimony you mentioned that pressures like animal disease are pushing them out of business. What policies can Congress consider to keep our turkey farmers on the map, and is the primacy of American turkey production at risk if Congress does not prioritize these issues?
Thank you. Specifically concerning AMPV, including that in the livestock indemnity program, we're going to go a long way to adding certainty to our industry. One of the major concerns I hear from younger growers right now is they aren't able to get financing because their bankers don't know how they can survive with losing 30, 40, 50% of their flocks. So providing that certainty that there is a backstop to these losses would be a godsend to our industry. Outside of that, just certainty in our high-path avian and influenza response. As I mentioned, staffing to make sure that we are actively surveilling for this virus, and that I'm very thankful that USD now has a very concrete plan to move forward, and we do hope that turkey is also included in that plan. But just that provides a lot of hope to our growers that maybe there's some light at the end of this tunnel, because God knows we can't survive doing the same old thing we've been doing for the last 10 years.
Thank you. Recently, egg prices have been all over the news. Egg prices are high and are an anomaly in Indiana. But at one state in particular that has grown used to high food prices. Since passing Prop 12, residents of California have been subject to historically high cost of protein, and now Californians are unable to cushion themselves from the impact of supply shortages. But this state initiative has trickle-down effects impacting farmers in my district 2,000 miles away. Mrs. Stevermer, if Congress fails to include a solution to Prop 12 in the upcoming Farm Bill, what implications will there be for our farmers and the purchasing power of consumers and the integrity of our food supply, especially under strains like animal disease?
If we don't address Prop 12 and the patchwork of regulations is allowed to continue across the country. So one state puts in a regulation that's slightly different from the next one, and now all of a sudden we as an industry are trying to market our pigs and raise our pigs to a variety of regulations. It will be chaos. And as I mentioned before, the next generation looks at that and says, I don't want to be part of that. And so we will lose a generation of farmers. And consumers will have to pay more for their food prices.
Thank you. As everyone is well aware, President Trump's tariff on Mexican and Canadian goods went into effect this morning. I know the potential of a trade war brings anxiety for producers in my district and across the nation, but I also know tariffs can be a way to make sure our trade partners hold up their end of the deal. Mr. Sander, where have our trade partners most abused our current trade agreements?
You know, a good example that comes to my mind is, we've allowed Australia to have access to our markets here in the U.S. for many years, and we have not been able to send even $1 of our product into their markets. And so I believe that's an example of a market that, export market that needs to be held accountable.
Thank you. Mr. Zimmerman?
I would reiterate, Australia and New Zealand have pummeled the sheep industry with lamb imports for decades. So when unfair trade practices like that are occurring, tariffs are definitely warranted. They have all kinds of advantages that we don't have in the United States, and it's important that we try to level the playing field. So I think in the face of such unfairness, we need tariffs.
Thank you. Well, with that, I'll yield back the rest of my time. Today's hearing has been a perfect example of why the livestock sector. Oh, he showed up. Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it, and thank you for allowing me to wave onto this. You are all here at a very timely juncture, as the chair has just noted, both in American history, but what it means to farmers across the country. As a guy from Iowa, sixth-generation family farm, these impacts are felt across not only my 87,000 family farms in Iowa, but across the country. We know that our farming communities are facing significant challenges, from rising input costs to the ongoing diseases like bird flu. I'd like to begin today by talking specifically, Mr. West, Mr. Zimmerman. You know farming isn't just a job. For many of us, it's a way of life. And diseases like bird flu and AMPV threaten our farmers' livelihood and the very future of their ability to farm. In the last year alone, Iowa's farmers have lost over 500,000 birds to AMPV alone, particularly in our turkeys. Mr. Zimmerman, I'd like to ask, is there a single USDA program that offers financial assistance to turkey producers impacted by APV? No. That's right. So I just want to repeat that again for all the folks who are watching at home and reporting on this from the ag side and are talking about the impact here. Not a single federal program currently exists to help our turkey producers recover from AMPV. And that's more than 1 million birds lost just in Iowa. Across the country, we are talking about true tragedy. And that's exactly why I'm proud to lead the Iowa delegation, and one that I think is important for the entire country here, that the USDA urged them to allow AMPV to qualify for the Livestock Indemnity Program, or LIP. And Mr. Chairman, I would ask that this letter be entered into the record.
Agreed.
Mr. Zimmerman, how would access to LIP program benefit producers in the coming months?
It would provide a lifeline. As you said, when you lose 30 to 50% of your flock, that's a loss of 30 to 50% of your yearly income. I mean, think of that if you're a salaried individual. How would you survive losing that much? And then again, it will provide some certainty to our lenders that there is hope and that there can be some recovery from these losses. In addition to that, I would like to address that, there is a vaccine for AMPV. We are starting to see that now, but the process that it took over a year for us to get that approved needs to be reevaluated, because this isn't the only animal disease we're going to have in the future, and there's going to be vaccines that need to come into this country, and they need to become, need to be regulated and safe, but it should not take over a year for us to have access to the tools we need to protect our flocks.
And I would agree with you on that. It's not even just a family losing half of their income. Imagine a family farm or a hometown community that sees half of its income wiped out. The ripple-on effect here is huge. And you're absolutely right. This isn't just in the turkey sector, but removing the regulation to be able to get, the vaccines needed to the front lines, it's not just in AMPV, it's also in bird flu. Mr. West, I know you have worked on this with the prices of eggs nearly doubling, something that, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle maybe didn't care about 6 months ago. Now it's all they can talk about. But the reality here is that a lot of this is being driven directly by bird flu, driving up costs, both at the supermarket, but on my breakfast table when I'm trying to feed 6 kids. I want to check with you on this. How are farmers' access to critical vaccines prevented by the spread of bird flu, while at the same time, if we could get these flu out here, not only would we help keep more flocks, we'd help drive down costs for consumers?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Is the question the availability of other vaccines aside from avian influenza?
Yeah, great clarifying point. Both the access to them, the regulatory items that Mr. Zimmerman just highlighted, and then being able to field that in a timely fashion.
We have had zero issues with vaccinations and vaccine to have inventory on our farms to this point. I can't speak to what's going to happen in the future, but the vaccines that we need and use are readily available at the moment.
Would you consider them critical for the success that you've seen in fighting bird flu?
Absolutely.
Would you like to see that model replicated when it comes to fighting things like AMPV for turkeys?
Yes. I would like to see avian influenza vaccine implemented and put into place and put into execution.
I would agree with you, and I think that there's a good pathway that you've highlighted here. Thank you, Mr. Chair. With that, I think we can all see the importance of the government getting to work on this to help communities in need while this is ongoing. With that, I yield my time.
Thank you. Today's hearing has been a perfect example of why the livestock sector is so important. As mentioned earlier, agriculture is incredibly interconnected. From the producer to the feedlot and from the harvest facility to the distributor, every role is important to delivering protein to the market and to our consumers. To our witnesses, thank you for being here today. We've heard you loud and clear, from supporting the three-legged stool to pushing back on unscientific salmonella framework to providing support to producers impacted by the avian flu and expanding our markets for American animal protein exports. We have our work cut out for us. I look forward to working with all of you in the livestock issues that are so important to America, and as we reauthorize one of the strongest farm bills yet. Under the rules of the committee's hearing, it will remain open for 10 calendar days to receive additional material and supplemental responses from the witnesses to any questions posted by a member. This hearing of the Subcommittee on Livestock, Dairy, and Poultry is now adjourned.